I laughed at my husband's funeral. Graham and I had the blessing of knowing he was possibly dying for 6 months and then another 6 months and 22 days where we knew he was going to die. Shortly before we had the news at 6 months that we were unlikely to grow old together, he turned to me after the children were in bed and suggested a glass of wine in the garden. Who was I to say no to a glass of wine with the most handsome man I'd ever met? So we took a bottle into the garden, watched the sun setting, and he told me he wanted to plan his funeral just in case, and that if we got good news he would let me know of any alterations as we went along. It was one of the funniest evenings of my life. He was adamant that he wanted Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, the song of the English rugby team, to be sung loudly and with vigor. We live in Wales. He was tickled about the vast majority of our friends not being able to sing the response song, which is normally sung with sign language, about where the English can place their chariot. He wanted people to be able to experience the joy that he had lived whilst creating space for sadness he had died. And so 6 months and 29 days later the day arrived. We had painted his coffin to look like the Welsh hills that he loved. Our 3 children had spent a day painting birds and rainbows and butterflies and bees and flowers. Each of his friends came over the night before, toasted him, and stuck a flower, etc. on his coffin. It was a true community effort. His funeral worked around the Quaker way of having an elder guide the service, but all are welcome to stand up and speak. Graham had asked our local vicar, a smashing chap about our age, whether he would be happy to MC it rather than vicar it. The offer was accepted with such graciousness. Our children were there, and at one point MC Andrew gestures to Graham's coffin and told everyone there, 650 plus people, that he couldn't do this service without commenting on its beauty, at which point our youngest, then aged 3, piped up that she had done the red flower, so Andrew invited them up to tell him which was their favorite flower/bug, etc., then said it was heartbreaking that no one could see the other side. So spun the coffin round on its stand. Graham would have been in hoots. This was then topped off towards the end, by which time I was due to speak and I was struggling. I heard Graham's best friend stand up. This chap is a comedy writer for the BBC. He's extremely funny and deeply loved by us all. I heard him stand. I felt his hand on my shoulder as he turned to face everyone who was sitting in silence. "My name is Frank." Long pause. "And I'm an alcoholic." The audible gasp was interrupted only by my peal of laughter. I knew exactly who had put him up to this, and I knew he had told Frank to time it for just that moment. Graham had told him that I would struggle at that point, and that he had Graham's blessing to use his darkest humor to do whatever it took to carry me through it. I stood and spoke. It was the only time since Graham died that I actually felt him nearby. I asked Frank directly, before my mill shredded him alive, if he had been put up to it, and he confirmed that Graham had sent him a text that night we sat in the garden. My husband made me laugh at his own funeral. He was a very special man.